Geometry is a very broad topic in mathematics. So because we're only doing a unit of geometry, we're going to focus on just one aspect of it, specifically measurement. We're going to look at measuring two-dimensional and three-dimensional objects. Before we get into any of that, we're going to begin with just a general discussion of units of measurement. Here in the US, we have two systems of measurement that we need to learn. The entire rest of the world works with the metric system. Our scientific communities work in the metric system, so we need to be fluent in the metric system. However, day to day in this country, we use the US customary units. So we're going to talk about both systems. Let's just start out by talking about the standard units of measurement for some different things that we might want to measure. Starting with length. Length is a one-dimensional measurement. So you could think the length of a desk, the length of your pencil. But don't forget the height of objects are also a one-dimensional measurement. So they are considered a length measurement. Also distances are a one-dimensional measurement. So they're also considered a length measurement. In the US customary system, think about the different units that we use to measure lengths. We have inches, feet, yards, and if it's a great distance or large length, miles. However, in the metric system, though you might be thinking kilometers, centimeters, millimeters, the thing that they all have in common is meter. So all of those different units you may have been thinking about are all based on the standard unit of length in the metric system, known as the meter. Area is a two-dimensional measurement. If you're sitting in a room, you can look at the floor and you notice the room, it has a length and a width to it, creating a two-dimensional space known as your floor. Now, when we measure area, we measure it in square units. So the number of squares it would take to cover that two-dimensional space, such as your floor. If we measure both dimensions, say the length and the width of your room in feet, then the squares would be foot-by-foot squares, and our standard unit in US customary would be square feet. However, what if we were measuring something smaller, such as a piece of paper? To measure both dimensions in feet, both the length and the width of a piece of paper, would tend to be a little bit inaccurate. So a more accurate way of measuring a smaller space would be in inches. If we measure both the length and the width in inches, then the squares we're talking about are inch-by-inch squares or square inches. However, if we measure both dimensions in yards, both the length and the width in yards, we'd be talking about square yards. And if it's a large space, we might be measuring both dimensions in miles, therefore giving us the unit of a square mile. In the metric system, if the standard unit of length is the meter, then the standard unit to measure both dimensions would be the meter, and we'd be talking about a standard unit of area, which is the meter squared. Volume of solids. When we talk about volume, sometimes that is confused with liquid capacity, so we're not talking about the amount of liquid that can fill a space. Here we're talking about solid objects. So if you're sitting in a room, look at that room now. We just finished talking about how it has a length and a width. If we add the third dimension of height, we've created a solid. We're talking about filling this space. That's the volume of solids. Now, if you think about taking a square, which was the standard unit of area, and we take a square and we give it the third dimension of height, what we've created is a cube. So volume is actually measured in cubic units. Area was square units. So, looking at your room, if we measure the three dimensions in feet, the length, the width, as well as the height, then the cubes that we would be concerned with would be foot by foot by foot cubes, or cubic feet. If we were measuring something smaller, say a jewelry box, then we might measure the three dimensions, the length, the width, and the height in inches, and we'd be talking about inch by inch by inch cubes, or cubic inches. We could measure the three dimensions in yards, thus giving us the standard unit of cubic yards, and we could measure the three dimensions in miles, thus giving us the standard unit of cubic miles. In the metric system, however, The standard unit is the meter, so we have meter by meter by meter cubes, or the cubic meter as our standard unit. When we talk about mass, we're talking about how heavy an object is. So in US customary units, we might measure in ounces or pounds, and if it's something extremely heavy, the standard unit might be tons. But in the metric system, our standard unit is the gram, abbreviated as G. Liquid capacity, this is where we're talking about that liquid volume. Think about all the different ways, the different standard ways really that we measure liquid capacity in the US customary system. We have fluid ounces, we have cups, pints, quarts, gallons, never mind teaspoons and tablespoons. So there's a number of standard units of measurement for liquid capacity in the US customary units. However, in the metric system, the standard unit of liquid capacity is the liter. Again, if you're thinking there's milliliters, kiloliters, things like that, they're all based on that standard unit of a liter. Finally, temperature. In the US customary system, we measure in Fahrenheit, and in the metric system, it's measured in Celsius. Coming up, we're going to do a brief review of the metric system. That will be in the next video. And then we will look at converting, because sometimes the units you have are not necessarily the units you need. So we're going to look at converting within the metric system. We'll look at converting within the US customary system. And we will also look at converting across systems. So if we measure something in a US customary unit but need to express it in metric, how we can go about doing that. So that will be in the upcoming videos.